Well, good morning, everyone, wherever you are across this very wet state, as well as we remember those people who have been affected by floods. It's been a very sad time for people. My name is Joan Hughes, and I'm the President of Council on the Ageing New South Wales. And I put out a very our conversation this morning, and it's great to have so many of you with us. Now, sometimes my internet connection is a little unstable, so you'll have to bear with me. I might just drop out a bit and then I'll come back in. If it gets really bad, then Megan Rawson, our CEO, will take over facilitating, but fingers crossed, it will stay connected to all of you. Some of you have been with us on these conversations and or webinars. We call them the COTA New South Wales conversations, and we've had many great topics. We did them all through 2021, and now we've got a big program happening in 2022. It's important for COTA New South Wales to connect with people right across this state, no matter where you are. And so it's a great way of us engaging with the people who want to be part of our organisation. So the aim of the conversation, or the aims of the conversation, to give you some new information, no matter what the topic might be, new ways of thinking, new ways of doing things. So I really suggest that you grab a cup of tea, get a cup of tea and have a book beside you with a pen. And when our speakers tell us some ideas that you think are great and that you might be able to put into action, just keep them as a written note for yourself, because that will help you action them after we've finished the conversation this morning. For some of us, there comes a point in our lives when we look at our home and decide it no longer meets our needs. It might be too large after the children have left home. We might live by ourselves. We might want a smaller place. The gardens might take too much maintenance. For some, it could be a financial consideration to move. And for others, they might have had bad experiences in that space. It can be a really difficult time to decide on what to do next, especially if you've lived in a place for a long time. It holds all of those wonderful memories, sad and happy, and sometimes good and bad. But maybe you've got lots and lots of stuff, and that's what we're going to talk about today. We're very lucky to have three speakers who can provide advice on the do's and don'ts of downsizing, how to declutter, and what to consider when you're looking for a new home, and some tips and tricks on moving to a new space. With us this morning, we have Peter Walsh, Dr. Margaret Ward, and Christy Owen. So there'll be an opportunity to ask questions through the chat or the Q&A function. So have a look down at the bottom of your screen and you'll see there's a Q&A function. Please use that once we get going. And what I try to do is to have a look at what people are saying and then put some of those questions to our speakers. Before we get started this morning, I would like to acknowledge and pay respect to the past, present, and future traditional custodians and elders of country throughout Australia, and especially here in New South Wales. I pay respect to their connections to land, sea, and community, and I'm talking to you from the land of the Bunurong people of the Yuin Nation. I hope you know where you are meeting us from. It's very important to acknowledge and respect our First Nations people. For those of you who aren't sure, COTA, New South Wales, stands for COTA on the Ageing, and we are the peak body for people over 50 in New South Wales. And that means, peak body means we're a policy and advocacy organisation. So we work with politicians and policymakers, service providers, and the media to make sure that the views of older people are heard and, more importantly, acted on. We also provide services for older people, and all of our services are up on our website, so you can have a look at them. There's more description, but I'll just give you the names of them, and by their names you'll know exactly what they do. So we've got Legal Pathways, Aged Care Navigator, which is trying to help people navigate a very complex aged care system. Living Longer, Living Stronger, about exercise for older people, older men, new ideas, and our community speakers program. Next thing, very quickly, it's a bit of what I call Zoom housekeeping, but you'll know that all of the presenters at the moment, apart from myself, they're on mute and you can't see them yet. But once they start their conversation with you, they'll be able to, they'll unmute and and you'll be able to see them, but if not for you. So this is a webinar, it's not a meeting. But as I said before, the Q&A panel at the bottom of your screen, you can ask your own questions at any time by typing them in to the Q&A panel. You'll also be able to upvote someone else's question if they're asking something that you would like to know. And as I said, we'll be answering questions during the panel discussion. There's also a chat panel where you can make comment during the presentation, and I ask you all to be respectful in the comments that you make and the questions that you are asking. This event is being recorded and will be available from tomorrow on the COTA New South Wales YouTube channel, along with all our other webinars that we held last year, and this is our second one for this year. So I recommend that you have a look at those webinars and please share them with your friends, colleagues, neighbours, anyone else that might be interested in the topic. So let's start with our first panellist. Great, it's very interesting because we don't usually get celebrities on. No, celebrities as in people that have been on TV. So Peter, we welcome you. Peter Walsh is a committed declutterer. He believes that clutter is anything that gets in the way of people living their best lives. He has just launched the second series of his television program, Space Invaders, on the Nine Network. He's also been a regular on the Oprah Winfrey Show, and he has written 7 best-selling books on how to be better organised and less cluttered. So, Peter, we're so excited that you can join us. Over to you.
Thank you, Joan. Thank you so much, and thanks to COTA for having me here. I don't know if you should refer to me as a celebrity. That's way more credit than I actually deserve.
Peter, if you're on TV, you're a celebrity.
Oh, well, yeah. Let's not get too carried away, shall we? So listen, it's a real thrill to be here, everyone, and I'm very excited by this. I think downsizing at the moment is a huge issue. I'm actually coming to you at the moment from the United States. I work both in Australia and in the United States. I've worked in Canada. I've worked in many countries in terms of helping people to downsize, declutter, get organized to live richer, happier, fuller lives. And I think the whole idea of downsizing has traditionally been seen as a lessening, as a diminishment, as something negative. And I'm very anti that concept, because I think the whole mindset of downsizing has to be changed. I have a very odd job. I've worked for the last 20 years as a professional organizer. Now, my job is strange. I go into people's house to help people's homes where they have been overwhelmed by clutter. I help them to look at their stuff and to let go of the things they no longer need, use, or love. Now, I go into homes that are what I would call have garden variety clutter. That's just bench tops, counters, garages, clothes, overwhelming. Help them let go of stuff. I go into homes where the stuff is excessive. I went into a home recently where there was about 7 foot of clutter in the family room. It was about 40 by 40 feet. My meters are not so great. I've lived in the United States for a long time. And the homeowner said to me, there's a piano in there somewhere. It's been in there for about 7 years, but I've not seen it in that time. And then I've gone into overwhelming homes where the clutter was extreme. There was a home I went into. It took a team of about 80 of us 10 weeks to declutter that home, downsize that home. We found over 3,500 handbags and over 3,200 pairs of shoes, just a massive amount of stuff. Now, my job has 2 components, and we'll be considering those today. There is the physical side of things, the what, and there is the psychological side of things, which is the why. The what is the stuff you're dealing with, and the why is the stuff between your ears. And if you only focus on the stuff, you will find it extremely difficult to downsize, because the why, the stuff that's going on in your head, is usually the most difficult, part of things to deal with. And I use two tools. I use an open hand to help people to really deal with the stuff. And the other thing I use is what I call the mirror. I hold up a mirror metaphorically to really reflect back to people the issues that they are facing. And often I have to give people permission that they will not give themselves, because the stuff we own has power. The stuff we own has power. It has the power of memory. It has the power of relationships. It has the power to evoke things from the past, which really often holds us back. And the show I'm doing at the moment that's airing in Australia, Space Invaders, shows that process in detail of me leading people through that process. But you today are here to listen to the three of us talk about downsizing. And I assume that many of you are tackling this or looking at this in your future with a certain element of anxiety. How am I going to tackle this? How am I going to deal with this when I feel so overwhelmed by the amount of stuff that I have in my home? When the stuff in my home represents the years I had in my relationship, when all this stuff represents things I did as a working person, when I'm letting go of that, when the stuff I have represents the raising of my children, when the stuff I have represents my time traveling the world or doing all these important things. Because for me, the purpose of downsizing is to make room for the life you now want to live. And it's often so difficult as you move into this latter part of your life to really separate from a lot of these memories that the stuff represents, to hold on to the things that are most important that represent that stage of your life, and to now make room for the next phase of your life. And that's the transition that you are in. Because with 250,000 Australians turning 65 every year, we are looking at this massive movement of people into retirement age, which is generally when people are looking at downsizing. And for many people, this is a huge struggle, because downsizing is a hugely challenging time, because it demands that you face a transition in your life. It demands that you look at a movement into the next phase of your life. And it's amazing for us that in every other transition of your life, from child to adolescent, from adolescent to young adult, from young adult to parent, from parent or from young adult into working adult, from working adult to parent, in each of those phases of your life, it has been easy and normal and natural and expected to let go of things to move into the next phase of your life. But suddenly, when you move from that working adult, empty nester into this next phase of your life, this concept of letting go, of downsizing, is seen often as an overwhelming challenge that is considered somehow a diminishment, instead of a natural step into the next stage of your life that I believe should be seen as thrilling and exciting and challenging, that will propel you into the next hugely rewarding and rich phase of your life. And that is the mindset that I work with people for, rather than what I often have to deal with many people who see this change as really, as I said earlier, a diminishment, and end up sitting in their home surrounded by stuff that is really kind of a sad set of mementos to a life left behind that they can't let go of. And I believe that by the end of this session, with myself and Margaret and with myself, Margaret and Christy, that you'll walk away with practical tips that will lessen this anxiety and enable you much more freely and with more confidence to step into this next stage with less anxiety. Now, I recently, a couple of years ago, went through this own step myself, downsizing my mother's family home, my parents' family home after my mother passed away, and pulled together this 20 years of experience from working with other families on 2 continents, and also working with my 3 brothers and 3 sisters, which was kind of like working with the United Nations to negotiate and deal with how to downsize my family home. And it had its moments, and pulled that together, all that experience together in this book, Let It Go. Now, it wasn't easy, and downsizing, I'm not going to pretend it's an easy exercise. It's tough, but if you follow a process, I promise you that on the other side is a richly rewarding experience that will leave you with only the things that are what I call the treasures that will help you make room for the life you now want to live. But you have to decide what that life looks like. And by deciding before you step into downsizing what that life is going to be, you can move through this process in a relatively calm, negotiated, intentional way with your partner that focuses on what you want from your home and from your life, rather than arguing about what you need for your life, for that home. Because those 2 words, what you want from your life or what you need for your home, can make a massive distinction in how you get to that end point. And I promise you, we'll talk further about that, because the bottom line is the stuff you own has power. And let me just finish this little presentation, this piece, by getting you to think about the fact that when you are overwhelmed by your stuff, we use language that underscores how we think about too much stuff. When we have too much of anything, we say there's so much stuff, we feel like we're going to drown. Oh my God, don't go into that space. You feel like you're going to be buried. If you go into that room, there's so much stuff, you cannot breathe. Now, it's interesting that we use that language in that way only when we talk about too much stuff. And I think we do that. Because deep down we know that when we have too much stuff, it overwhelms and kind of chokes the life from us. So the purpose for me in downsizing is to remove all of the extraneous stuff, to remove all of the stuff that stops us stepping into the new phase of our life. And one of the first steps, and I will come back to this, and I want you to think about it in the next few minutes as the other speakers are chatting, is that all the things you own are not the same. In your home at the moment, you have memory clutter, memory stuff, and the memory items are the things that remind you of an important person or achievement or event from your past. And you have a lot, I assume, of memory items in your home. Memory items, the stuff that remind you of things from your past. And the fear is that if you let go of the item, you will lose the memory. We all have those things. That's one group of stuff. The other group of stuff is what I call I might need it one day items. I might need it one day. And generally, we all have a ton of that too. That's the fondue pot that's on the top shelf in your kitchen that you haven't used for 10 years, but you know for certain that one day you are going to have the best fondue party ever, and so you need to hold on to it. It's all those magazines with all those great recipes. It's all those tools in the garage that you know that when you retire, you're going to get to use. It's all those things that you're holding on to that you know you will use one day. And now suddenly you're confronted with downsizing and confronted with the choice of what you are going to do with all of these items that represent either all these memories that mean so much to you, or all these dreams that you have had of pursuing, but you want to downsize from a 4-bedroom home to a 2-bedroom unit. What are you going to do? Therein lies the question. That's why we're here today. We're happy to answer these questions. I have been doing this for 20 years and I'm thrilled to help you with that. Back to you, Joan.
Oh, great. Thanks very much, Peter. Now, where are you? Where are you physically?
Oh, Joan, I don't ask you personal questions.
I told you, I'm on the south coast of Australia.
I actually am in Palm Springs in California.
Nice.
And it is coming up on 5 p.m. on Wednesday afternoon.
Good. Well, that allows, amazing. Technology is amazing that you can join us from that far away. Peter, there's a few questions coming through, which we'll deal with throughout the morning.
Good.
But there's a few people that are asking, well, where can I get help from? Where can I go to get someone who's reputable that will help me through this process? So that's a common theme.
Sure. If you go to the website iopo.com.au, it's the International Association of Professional Organisers in Australia, iopo.com.au. They're a wonderful group in Australia and they have all certified professional organisers. They are amazing.
Okay, great. The other thing I think that, Peter, you've spoken about, which is so important, is the emotions that are attached to our belongings, the memories that they hold, and
Yes.
I like the way that you describe that. But we do have some people who've joined us this morning, of course, where their partners have died.
Yes.
And so the memories are even more difficult to process.
Yes.
And therefore those decisions are difficult. So folks, if that's you out there, we do feel high empathy for you, and it will take time. Time is important as well.
Yes.
There was another person who just wanted to get some financial advice about using super to downsize. Just all of you who are attending this morning, this is not a financial advice webinar conversation about we will do one of those in the future, but we won't be able to actually give financial advice through this session. So Peter, stay with us. It was fantastic. Thank you. And now it gives me great pleasure to introduce Dr. Margaret Ward. Where are you, Margaret? There we are. Good morning. Good morning to you, Margaret.
Good morning, everyone.
Margaret is the co-convener of the Australian Network for Universal Housing Design. She originally trained as an architect and has been an advocate, public servant, and a service provider in the areas of housing and disability, working towards the adoption of housing design, which includes everyone, regardless of age, circumstances, and ability. Great to have you here, Margaret, and we look forward to your conversation.
Thank you very much, and I welcome everyone today. My task is to help you consider the type of home that you will need as you age, with a particular emphasis in its design. I've put up a photo here of my old dad. Here he is, 96. And he had downsized many, many years ago. He's blind in this photo and very lame. But as you can see, he has the key important things around him, and he's connected with his community, and here he is involved with 2 people from the refugee community, an issue that he was absolutely passionate about until his death. Now, in part, housing design played a role here to keep him engaged and interested in everything around him. Planning for your old age is a natural thing to do for some. But if you've never planned much in your life, then it might be very challenging for you now. And as Peter has just intimated, and particularly when it's about the last chapter in your life. So while downsizing might be exciting, it is for some people where they want to be when they die. So if you wish this home to be your last home, where you're likely to be frail and disabled, and you will be frail and disabled if you're lucky, there for some time. True, this is a confronting thought, and we all hope that the end will be fast and painless and in our sleep, but this rarely happens. Medical science is lengthening the aging, frailty, and dying process, sometimes adding many difficult years to our lives. And when that happens, we do not know, your life can turn on a sixpence. Most people want to remain home until they die. However, most people fail to do so. They end up in hospital or in nursing homes. And there are many reasons for this, and the design of your home is a key one. So a bit of forethought about downsizing can allow you to stay amongst the community you know, the people you love, and the things that give you pleasure for as long as possible, like my old dad. So when you are thinking of downsizing and looking for a place to buy, there are some features to look for. The first is an accessible path from the car park or front gate through to the entry door. Now, most apartments built after 2011 will have those features by law. The second is a single level dwelling with an open plan, and a simple plan with few corridors and generous doorways. The third is a step-free hobless shower and a bathroom with a generous space in front of the toilet. Now, they might have a shower screen, and that's fine, and I'll talk a little bit later about that. But it's that hob and that step that can cruel us when we are most frail. And the last is a lift that's big enough to take an ambulance gurney. Now, that's a bit of a gruesome thought, but it's a very important thought. So it's difficult to find the perfect place with all these features, and you're likely to need some modifications to the home to maintain your functioning and to avoid an accident happening. So I think of modifications falling into three groups. The first is those modifications that take months to modify, and that's things like widening doorways, building ramps, installing lifts. They not only take months, but they take money to modify. The second can be done in a day, and that's things like removing a shower screen, installing grab rails, repositioning light switches, and installing new door handles. And there are many very handy builders who can do this very quickly and affordably for you. And the third are the things that can be bought at Bunnings. That's the use of non-slip mats over toilet chairs, or the addition of bed rails, or items like that. So if you think possible modifications to the home that you're looking at fall into the second or third groups, then you've got the right place. It's the homes where you need months to modify at short notice where you're going to get into trouble. The cheaper and quicker they can be done, the less time you're at risk in hospitals or rehab places or displaced from your home permanently. For renters, you have the right to make reasonable adjustments. That is number 2 and number 3. And to a rental property, but you're obliged to rectify those when your tenancy is finished. If you're building a new home, there are very good guidelines around. The livable housing design guidelines are available on the internet, and they're helpful, very helpful, and I encourage you to consider the gold level. There's a silver level, which is just for very minor modifications. The gold level allows for most people to live there in the long term, and the platinum are for people who want to manage their home in wheelchairs. So I suggest the gold level is adequate for most people. For apartments, there are a number of accessible apartments being built in New South Wales. Developers are obliged to do 20%. That's a voluntary basis, and it doesn't necessarily always happen. So these units are around, but they're not readily identifiable. So it does require the buyer or the renter to ask for them and to look out for them. Of course, there are many other features that you want to consider, such as price, ambience, view, location, and energy efficiency. These are all important. Buildings that are well designed try to meet all these needs. But I suggest that the features I've listed above are the most important, as they dictate how long you stay there. Many people have been working for a long time to ensure that these features are in all homes that are built today. They should be readily available for everyone, given our aging population and the fact that none of us know when we're going to need them. This will be so in all states except New South Wales and South Australia. A sobering thought here that with such a proactive COTA New South Wales, the New South Wales government has chosen not to sign up to this amendment to the building code. New South Wales persists with a policy to encourage builders to make a small selection of homes to provide these features, and there's no easy way to find them when and if they're built. COTA has been actively involved in trying to change this policy, and I applaud them for their stance. And I encourage you to follow this campaign. It's called Livable Homes in New South Wales. If you're interested, you can contact COTA New South Wales for more information. So thank you.
Margaret, thank you. That was, we didn't pay you for that bit of advertising at the end.
I know, you deserve every minute of it.
Thank you. And I tell you, it's just been such a hard fight. And for all the people that have joined us this morning, if you can help with that fight, it's Livable Homes in New South Wales. We're not asking for a lot, as Margaret has just shared with us. The things that we're asking for will be better in the long run for older people and their families and people who need to come and provide care for them in their homes. And it's much cheaper than putting people into aged care facilities. And we know the neglectful system that we're trying to advocate to get improvements in. So it's such a sensible approach. But for some reason, and as Margaret said, the New South Wales government have said no. But we haven't given up the fight. So part of COTA New South Wales is fighting words are we keep chipping away. We don't give up until we win, and we're determined to win this battle. Margaret, I really I think one of the important messages that I got from your presentation this morning was we often forget that the people around us, so our neighbourhoods, our friends, our community is so important. And sometimes when some people move into aged care facilities, that's the thing that's lost. When my father spent his last few years at an aged care facility, every time I'd visit him, the words he'd say to me, "Sweetheart, the days are so long. The days are so long," because all of his friends and family couldn't visit regularly. And as he got older, a lot of his friends died. So the emotional attachment that we have to our home and community is really good for our health and well-being, as long as the homes are in a sense, catering for our needs. So the changes that you suggested were very easy to pick up, and I do thank you for your presentation. So stay with us, and we'll now go to our third speaker this morning. I'd like to introduce Christy Owen to you folks. Where is Christy? There she is.
Good morning.
Christy is COTA New South Wales representative on the, pardon me, on council on the, I'll start again. She's the representative on the COTA National Policy Council. I got it out. And we're very thrilled that she does that, in a sense, on our behalf. She works full-time in the adult education sector and has worked in community services and local government for many years. Her family includes 2 adult children who have left home and a husband who has just retired. She's recently gone through the process of moving from a large family home to a 2-bedroom unit, but sounds lovely. It's by the beach. Very lucky. So welcome, and we look forward to what you're going to share with us this morning.
Thanks very much for that. I just have a brief PowerPoint to show and speak to, and I'd just like to acknowledge the comments of the people who spoke previously, because I definitely agree with all their sentiments. I think everything that they spoke about is something that I've either considered or experienced during my transition, I think you'd call it, my reset. So very wise words. So just thinking about, first of all, why move? And I think you need to work yourself through the benefits that it might have for you, and any misgivings, like be really upfront and honest about any misgivings that you might have. Don't sort of push those down, you know, below the surface. Talk about those things. Get yourself ready for some hard work and some challenges, not just physical work, but emotional work. One of the reasons we chose to move now was because we knew it was going to be physically hard, and we wanted it to be something that we could manage before we became older and frail. We had to give a lot of thought to the costs of moving, because there's costs attributed to selling your house and then buying your house. So there's costs either end of that sort of spectrum. And we thought of it as a time to refresh and reset our life for the next 40 years, God willing. We also thought about, tried to prioritise what were the really main things that we needed to focus on, because there's a lot of busy, you know, work, busy thinking happening there, and also to have a really good think about what we needed to give away. So in terms of the benefits, this resetting idea was quite important, because it's, you know, quite a large chunk of your life after work. I haven't left work yet, but my husband has. And so, you know, we're looking at quite a long time now. As people have said, we'd live a lot longer. And we know that the future is going to be very, very different. And it's, you know, the change that's occurring technologically and just in the world in general, climate change, you know, what's happening in terms of our communities and what's happening with international politics, all the rest of it. It's going to be a different world. So kind of prepping for, you know, all those contingencies. It was an exciting thing. Once we both agreed, yes, we're going to sell the house and move, it actually reinvigorated us, because we felt that, you know, we're thinking, well, what now? You know, kids have left, no grandchildren yet. And, you know, what's our next big move? And of course, with COVID, there was no international travel. So we had none of those, you know, normal escapes that people take on board. So it was getting to the point where every time we needed a bit of maintenance done, it was costing us about $1,000. So we kind of went, need this done, oh, that'll be $1,000. Need that done, oh, that'll be $1,000. And, you know, in any 1 year, we were spending like $10,000 or $12,000 on maintenance. And we had a really nice house, but it wasn't going to stay nice unless we invested all that money to maintaining it. The thought of being able to lock up and leave was really great, because, you know, I often hear people on holidays saying, oh, I've got to go home and clean the pool and mow the lawns. And so, you know, the thought of coming back from a holiday to maintain your house seemed pretty strange. And it's a great opportunity to meet new people. We found that our very good neighbours, many of them who were a little younger than us, were moving away onto their next phase of life, and we were going to be, you know, stuck in the cul-de-sac, I suppose, as the last people standing. We were looking for a house that was warmer, and the house that we had high costs of warming and heating. And we thought, you know, we might, without paying those big power bills and, you know, the pool maintenance bills and air conditioning bills, et cetera, might have a little bit more disposable income. And knowing that one of us was finishing work, even though there's superannuation and so on, you do want to be careful about your expenditure. We had the opportunity to move somewhere where we wanted to live and somewhere else that we wanted to live. And I just thought not having to chase a tradie to do any maintenance would be such a luxury, because I've just felt like the last 5 years of my life I was trying to chase tradespeople to come and fix things. And I was looking for something that was a little simpler and to give me a little bit more time. Some of the misgivings, and you may all experience this, and Peter alluded to this earlier, was, you know, am I up for the task? And you really have to get your mental health together as well as your physical health. So what are you going to do with your stuff? Will you have enough money to buy your new house? You know, is there a better lifestyle out there? Missing neighbours and so on. You know, the family often wants you to hang on to the family home because they have the memories too. And so everybody sort of goes through this grieving process. But, you know, as we said, your house is not the life you've had. It just represents that. And I guess because we've all been working, and a lot of us went through the 80s and 90s when, you know, everyone's cashed up and there seemed to be a lot of money around and people were just buying stuff. It was a time when your success and all your achievements were tied up with consumer goods and with things you could buy. And so all those things that you buy are a symbol of your success and often, you know, a successful career. So changing that mindset that things aren't symbols of success, I think was quite an interesting thing to come to grips with. I was also the only granddaughter of two women who also had jewellery and lots of collectibles. And so even prior to moving, I had to consider what I did with my own heirlooms from my own grandparents. And I also have a mum and dad in their 80s who also have a range of things. And so in a way, I'm downsizing before my parents are downsizing, and that's been quite an interesting journey. So it does take hard work, and some of the things that we had to grapple with were I'm working full time. We had all these other family events that happened in the middle of it. We had a wedding. We had person passing, my husband's retirement, etc. So there's a lot of other busy things going on in as well as life. And I think the emotional work of moving is much tougher than the physical work in many ways. We had to figure out how we're going to distribute all our goods and how we're going to store them. And storage costs are quite expensive, so just bear that in mind if you do want to hang on to stuff while you make a decision. We've started off with two big storage containers, took about one storage container worth to our new place, and we had a whole other storage container that has gone to Marketplace and redistributed to friends and given to our kids and so on, and about a quarter of a storage container will be going to the tip. And we're literally paying storage costs for stuff that we're not using. That's happened. We've done that for 4 months, so that's just about to end. And we did Airbnb for a year, and we decided that we would try to live in the sort of place that we would move into. It was much smaller, but we did learn to live small, and we did learn to live together closely. And it was a really good experience because we realised we could survive on like a suitcase full of stuff for a year. And we didn't miss anything that we had in storage. So I highly recommend giving that a go. Of course, there's costs. So, zhuzhing your house before you leave is quite expensive if you want to sort of, dress the house. And you do have to then reinsure your new house and, organise your utilities and so on. Nearly everything from our last house I've used in our new house. I haven't had to buy much stuff. So the main things, it took us about 3 years from the first thought bubble until we settled. But the main thing is your location and your budget. Your budget literally determines, your limitations, I suppose. So I wouldn't be looking at stuff that you can't afford, and location is really important, and being part of a community that you want to live in is great thing to sort of really give a lot of thought to. We were in a really private cul-de-sac far away from community in both our previous houses, where our neighbours were our community. And now we've moved into a really busy area where our community is much more dense, and we are meeting new neighbours living a different lifestyle. So we just had to really get on the same page. That was really crucial, my partner, my husband and I. And we had to prioritise our non-negotiable. What 3 things do we want out of our house? And then everything else is a bonus. And once we figured that out, we only ended up looking at 4 places. And the 4th one was it. So we did a bit of tire kicking and internet looking and all that. But physically, we only went to 4 places because after a year, we knew exactly what we were after. And we were very lucky to find where we are. So yeah, called in professionals. I just used, good conveyancers, good agents and removalists, and they did most of the hard work. I just trusted them and was prepared to pay them to do their job. I didn't try and be a real estate agent expert or a conveyancing expert or a removalist expert. I just thought, they know what they're doing. So I put a lot of trust in people to do their job. And we set a date to sell our house 5 months before we actually sold it. So we had good lead time for getting our house ready for sale and to mentally prepare. And my tip is don't buy more space than you need. We were originally considering moving into a townhouse, a 4-bedroom townhouse, downsizing from a house. And in hindsight, we're so glad that we didn't, because we would have ended up with something much bigger than we needed. So yeah, just keep healthy and give things away, be generous, and don't be hurt if people don't want your stuff. It's your stuff. And so, if you want to offer things to your children, and better that you give them now than when you die, essentially, if they don't want it, I just think you need to go with that and try to find people who will benefit from it and be generous. Give yourself time. separate out the things that you really want and the things that you're not sure about. And yeah, turn that spare time that you have when you're downsizing into living time. Turn the mowing time into time walking and swimming, and get used to your new lifestyle gradually. Don't wait till an emergency pushes you to a decision. Be in charge of that decision and ensure that you have the power over your belongings and over your house, and not that it kind of has power and control over you. And remember that your house is not who you are. It's just somewhere that you live. So I was looking for something that was well lit, safe, and okay for climate change coming into the future, that had a really clear pet policy, good waste disposal, good technology, you know, that the garden was fit for purpose, and that we had good neighbours, and parking and garaging, and very accessible. My mother-in-law, who's in her late 80s, came to our place with a walker, and she was thrilled. There's not one single step between the garage and the house, and bathroom and turning circles and all that sort of stuff are great. So I know that that will take us into the future. And so, yeah, lower power bills, less cleaning, 500 metres to everything that we need, and no more stress about what we're going to do with our stuff.
Great, that's great. Christy, you know what I really liked about your presentation is the importance that you and your partner husband put to the planning. I mean, I think often decisions have to be made quickly for people when they need to downsize because of maybe health issues or a tragedy or something that's happened. But
Yeah.
if you've got not so much the luxury, but if you've done the planning like you've done, I really value what you've shared with us this morning. A couple of people that I'd like to respond to, and then we'll open it up to all the panelists. So if Margaret and Peter can come on, turn their videos off, that would be great. Thank you. I think the issue of the memories, and I think this is a question that that we could probably answer in some ways, but I'll probably start it off by just thinking about those things, and Peter's categorised them. Those things are important. And in my own life, I've got lots of old things that, of course, no one in the younger people in my family don't want them. My son's got some affinity towards a few of them. So my husband and I just decided we would create this inventory, which are the things that we will keep, the things that we'll move on to family members if they want them. But we've actually written the story about them. And so we've asked people for their memories about the iron bed that belonged to my partner's grandparents. Actually, it's one of those old iron beds, and there's all sorts of funny stories that have come about. So we've taken a picture of the item and we've written a story about it, and then we'll publish a book just to be shared with the family. And that's a great way of moving things on, but also having those memories in a book, basically, so in a sense they don't get lost. The other thought that I had was, a lot of people are asking about the cost of professional help, and we'll talk about that this morning. And we've got a few, there's a consistent theme here about what do I do if my partner is the hoarder, you know, and I'm not, I'm ready to move on, but that person won't get rid of the stuff. And it's not a gender thing here, but there's been a couple of references to blokes and their tools in the shed that they might never use, but they can't get rid of them because, as Peter mentioned, there's one day you might think, I might need that hammer that hasn't, the head's all rusty, but I might need it. So who would like to start with that idea about if we've got, if we're lucky to be in a partnership and one person wants to move and the other person doesn't want to and or is a hoarder? Who wants to answer that question?
I'm happy to jump in here.
Yep, good.
Okay. Number one, I'd be very careful about using the term hoarder, number one, largely because hoarding is a very distinct mental health condition. So let's just back away from the use of that word for a second. And I prefer to use the term, you know, a serious clutter or something like that, because if someone has a hoarding condition, then it's something that you would need to get a trained, skilled mental health professional to assist with. So let's just back away from the use of that word. If there are two things we're talking about here, if you want to move and your partner does not, then you're immediately in a conflict situation. Immediately. Look, I always come back to the question of, it's useless, whether it's about moving or about the stuff. The moment you focus on the item, you end up in a situation that very quickly moves away from the issue that you're talking about and becomes a discussion or an argument about power. That there has to be a winner and there has to be a loser. I want to move. I don't want to move. Has to be a winner and a loser in that discussion. There's no other alternative. It's black and white. It's yes or no. It's 1 or 0. So, and in that argument, the winner feels victorious and the loser feels defeated and resentful. And there's no middle ground. So you have to start somewhere else. You have to start with a discussion about what is the life you want to be living. And that's the point that Christy hit on. What do we want the next year, the next 2 years, the next 5 years to look like? And let me just come at this from a tangent for a second. We wanted my mother to move, after my father passed away, to move out of her home. She wouldn't, she refused. We argued with her. We tried to convince her. She absolutely refused. The bottom line is we could not get her to move, and we had to accept the fact that until something catastrophic happened, she wasn't going to move. Something catastrophic happened. She fell in the middle of the night, had to be taken by ambulance to hospital, went into a nursing home and never returned to her home. So you have to accept the fact that you can't change another person's mind by force. That's the truth. However, if you come at this from the discussion, as Christy said, you have to start with not win and lose, but what is it that you want from our life together? What do you want? Do you want to maintain this huge home? Do you want to have to pay $15,000 a year on maintenance? Because if your partner says they don't want to move, they're coming from a place of fear. They're scared of change. They're scared of what might come next. They're scared of letting go of what they know. So to argue about the move is simply to push them further into fear, further into an entrenched position. So you start somewhere else. Don't start about the move. Start more gently and try to come at this from the back door would be my suggestion. And even if you have children or good friends, word them up to start to talk with this person in a subtle, gentle way about the cost personally and emotionally on that person of staying in that home in a non-threatening, supportive way, and try to bring them around from that position. But understand, you can lead a horse to water, but you cannot make that horse move out of their home.
No, good comments. And I think, Peter, the other thing that makes it complicated for some relationships is if you've got people moving into retirement or moving into the next chapter of their life, and then the partner wants to downsize. And so there might be multiple things that are happening, but for some people, they find it really difficult to manage all of the multiple changes
Sure.
for the next transition in their life. So you've got
Because
to go a bit slowly, I think, with
Yeah.
some people.
Who am I? Who am I, particularly for men, and this is very sexist, who am I without my stuff? Who am I without all those tools? Who am I without tinkering around the house, doing all my maintenance stuff on the weekend? Who am I?
Good.
That's the question.
It is a big question. Now, Kirsty, there's another theme coming through. People are so interested in how you decided where to go. And I think you've told us that, and you were very lucky to find a place. But there are some people that have said, look, we've been used to space, and now we suddenly have to shove ourselves into a retirement village place or a smaller place, and I really can't get used to not having space around me. So that is the first question to ask you. And I think, Margaret, you might have mentioned in your presentation, well, one of you did, the importance of what to have around you when you do decide to declutter and to move on. And people mentioned, neighbourhoods, and I think someone else then said in the Q&A, make sure you've got good health services near you. That's really important as we get older. And the other one that I would say would be accessible trains. Live in big populated areas, I think my internet's going out a bit, being close to services in terms of transport, health, community, exercise, that's all important. But the question is, Kirsty, how did you manage to go from big space to a smaller space, and how can you help people working through that transition?
Okay, one of the benefits of moving to an area which is, has a lot of lifestyle benefits is that you're out of the house a lot more. You're actually out walking, exercising, meeting friends for coffee, very close to the library, very close to community centres and so on. So I find my new lifestyle is much more out than in. And that's part of connecting to the community, but also part of having more free time. And so where I might have been at home, most weekends, cleaning and, doing all the things on a Saturday and the dry cleaning and the husband doing the mowing and so on, we're just out now. So needing a big house is not so important. And I found that when we're out, we meet other people who are going out. So we also socialise at the same time and get some exercise. And so the need for the big house is not there. We have access to so many local services here that, I could be on a train in 500 metres and be in the city in under an hour if I want to. Whereas before it was, it was a good 20, 25 minutes walk to the train station. So it's very different in terms of what you are able to do with the smaller house because of the amount of time that you have that's free. And if you pick a location that's near the things that you like to do, well then, you're already in the middle of it. And you do have that breathing space, Peter talked about, I don't have that overwhelmed feeling anymore, and I can breathe and, can get up and leave like 5 minutes and I'm out on the street and basically in the community. And, if I want to, walking and at the beach and swimming. And I'm not saying everybody wants that lifestyle, but, moving to the things that you love.
Very good point. And I think we've learned through COVID the importance of being connected. Now, for some of us that have important IT and we can Zoom and we can do FaceTime and all of those things.
Same.
For many people, they can't do that. And many people have felt super lonely and super sad, and we don't want that to happen either.
Can I just add one point? Sorry, just one point. When my husband was working, his home was his castle. It was a sanctuary. He had a very high stress job and he really embraced, privacy. Whereas now privacy is not such a big thing and we're much more excited about being connected to the community than the need for privacy. It's a real mind shift. So that's had a big bearing as well.
And he's happy with that?
He's very happy with that. Yeah. Yeah. Good. Very happy.
Another theme that's coming through now, and we'll go to you first, Margaret, is this whole issue of once you do decide of what things you want to get rid of, family don't want it, friends don't want it. How do you, if we have a big issue at the moment with people sending things to charity, to the Bennies or the Salvos or Uniting Care, whoever it might be, and people want to know, how do you donate goods? Has that been a problem? Or do you, we'll probably start with you, Margaret. Have you had to downsize, and did you have to donate things to anywhere, and how did that happen? Was it easy, hard?
We had a particular issue because my family have this rule that the furniture doesn't belong to you, but you keep it for the next generation. So we had a lot of antiques. So I actually called in the family, and the other thing we did, which I think is which was brilliant, may I say, is that I got once we knew where we were moving, we got an interior designer in who actually told us what would work in the apartment. So I went around our old house and stuck stickers on those things and said they're coming with us. And the rest, I called in the family and they chose what they wanted. So we have a large family. So we got a mini mover and we did 7 drop-offs in a day. And that was very satisfying. Then the rest, yes, we did send to Vinnie's, and there are things they don't want and you have to take them to the dump. You just have to take them to the dump. But by that point, you can get pretty ruthless. This is a learn as you go exercise. And I just like to say here, one of the things that Christy said, which I think is very important, is that you can do a suck it and see. I have a girlfriend at the moment who's moved into the apartment nearby. She's moving from a 4-bedroom townhouse full of stuff. She's calling this her overseas holiday because she can't go overseas for obvious reasons. She's rented an apartment for 6 months and she's learning so much every day about what she doesn't need, what city life looks like, or medium density life is like. And I'm just watching the learning process, and it's just magnificent, really, because she goes back to her old house, throws out stuff. I'll never need that now, and then goes back to what she calls her adventure place.
That's lovely. That's
so I don't think she'll ever go back to the townhouse.
I think it's like Christy's idea of doing Airbnb for a while, or going to smaller. Exactly what your girlfriend's done.
Yeah, that's a marvelous idea, and I'm seeing it in action.
Yeah, it's terrific. Peter, what about your ideas about people?
Look, I think the first thing that's really important to impress on people is the very basic rule with donating is that if you would not give something to a family member, then don't give it to donation. That's super important, because many charities, many places where people are donating stuff have become dumping grounds for stuff that people do not want. And then what happens is that Vinnie's or the Salvos or similar charities have to then pay to have those things carted to dumps. And so if you would not give it to a family member, if it's a piece of clothing where there are perspiration stains, or a piece of furniture that is scratched or broken, it is not suitable for donation. So do not give it to a charity, number one. In my own family, when my mother passed away, we had a system where if you had given a gift to my family, to my mother or father, you could take it back. That was the first measure. Number two, we all then drew a number out of a hat. There are 7 of us. And then for each of us then took turns in that number of taking things we wanted from the house. You could then trade if someone had taken something before you, if you would prefer that. It was all very reasonable. The interesting thing was and then we went around that circle until that had finished, and then the rest of the items were donated to suitable charities. I noticed someone had said that they had phoned around and phoned charities that wanted specific items. Great idea. Things like old sheets, blankets, and so on. that are torn or stained. Animal shelters, welcome those all the time. So you can pass those off if you're a fan of four-legged charities. The big thing then, if you are downsizing yourself, and I go into details in my book, it is very important to find treasures, the best of the best. In my own case, I only took 2 things from my parents' home, which for me were the treasures. And you need to do this in your own home. When everything is important, nothing is important. That's super major item to remember. The 2 things I took from my parents' home were this absolutely valueless, scratched, crappy plate that my mother used to always make my favorite dessert on when I was a kid, a lemon meringue pie. Every time I look at it, it makes me laugh and smile. I cook and make the same pie on it now myself. It means nothing to anyone, but is an absolute treasure for me. In terms of financial value, 0. And the other treasure I took from my parents' home, my dad's war medals. There was only the original set. I had 6 duplicates made and gave 1 to each of my brothers and sisters. These are the only 2 items I took from my parents' home. Everything else really meant nothing to me. What are the treasures in your own home or in your parents' home that mean the most? And I listened to what Margaret said and to what Christy said about furniture and about the items that they owned. But the truth is, your kids generally don't want your stuff. And it may pain you and be like a knife in your heart, but generally your kids don't want your stuff.
Anyone else? Oh, do you want to say something about the stuff that you had to get rid of, Christy?
Yes, I agree with that. I don't think you can be offended when you say they don't want your stuff. You just have to take that for what it is. Because I know how I felt when my grandmother gave me so many items, and beautiful as they were, antiques and jewellery and collectibles. I had to sort of, ask her forgiveness, but I actually had to end up auctioning them and redistributing them all, because not only, this was about 15 years ago, this is before I moved, I just had nowhere that I could put them or display them other than just bubble wrap them in storage in the loft of my house. And so I don't want to give that burden to my children. So I've given them things now to look at, and I've said, if you or your partners want those things, by all means, keep them. And some of them were their own things, like I've given them back their baby books and artworks that they did as children and some of their school books and things. And they're all getting a laugh out of that and having fun. But I said, don't feel that you've got to keep them. It's just for you to remember, because I've let go of them now, and for you to keep or do with what you wish. And that's been a bit of fun for us all, because we've been able to reconnect on those things, but it's not who we are.
But to Margaret's point though, Christy, the photo book idea with the story of the item, particularly if they're family historical items, I think I do that as well. And I think it's a great idea to maintain the memory and still be able to pass on the item.
And I did that.
Yeah.
I've taken a photo of everything. It's important, of my grandmother's and my children's.
Yeah.
And that's all contained in, my phone basically, and downloaded onto a USB.
And it's very easy. The book that I did for which we haven't quite finished yet, it's so easy to do. And those books are quite cheap. You can just send it off and they'll print them, and then those memories stay. They stay in a book.
Yeah.
And the other thing that we've just sold a house here, and what we also did was we asked people memories of the parties and things that they had in this house, and it's hysterical. I mean, we sit there and we laugh and the memories come back. And when I'm sitting, wherever I'll be sitting in my 80s and 90s, hopefully, I'll be able to look at that book and it will bring back those memories.
Yeah.
But we've put them into a smaller space, and it's
Yeah.
still in our heart, but it's in
Yeah.
a smaller space. Now, the other thing that a few people have said too, don't forget, if you want to get rid of stuff, I know that dumps, they don't call them that anymore, but recycle centres, well, I call them dumps. Most of those places now do have different areas where you can drop things off, because people are saying, what do I do with videotapes? What do I do with cassette tapes? The local one here, they've got it all sectionised, so you can just, load up your car, take it there. Sometimes it does cost, but other times you get vouchers. It doesn't cost anything. In terms of taking stuff to Vinnie's, the Salvos, other charitable organisations, I've got into the habit of actually taking a photo and going to the store and saying, look, this is what I've got. Would you be interested in it? So that sort of is practical. And a lot of councils, of course, have twice a year or once a year where you can put things out on the footpath.
Yep.
But, very much I agree with Peter here. You do not give yucky stuff, but, stuff that you just wouldn't give to your worst enemy. Don't give that, dump that stuff. Don't give that to charities. It's not fair to them. They have got a big job sorting through stuff. I suppose I'd like to finish on something here that I've written that, we've all talked a lot about downsizing, decluttering, and I think you've all given us some very, very practical ideas, and we have pursued that whole notion of emotions that are attached to things that we want to get rid of, hopefully. I just want to finish, I think, on I think what Peter said about just about this whole notion of a new phase of your life. And Christy, you've shown that to us. You're in a new phase of your life. What does that whole thing of freedom mean to you? I'll start with you, Peter, because you brought it up in your first
Yeah,
presentation.
it's interesting that traditionally, I'm really working on this at the moment, that we coined a term in the early 1900s for that early period just after childhood. We called it adolescence. And then a term was coined for the period 45 to 65-year-olds, and it's been called midolescence. But no term has been coined for the 65 onward period. And it's traditionally been seen as a winding down, almost, a put out to pasture phase, a diminishment, as I said earlier, a lessening. And instead, for me, it's a time to step into a new phase. I mean, look at Christy's face. I mean, here's a person who's supposed to be on the verge of retiring, a person who's supposed to be putting her feet up, and instead she's talking about socializing activities, about new travel, about new phase, about all the words she's used, about being invigorated, about downsizing and finding all new exciting things to do. And traditionally, the concept of retiring or downsizing is about slowing down, about doing less, about having less. And in fact, it's exactly the opposite. It's about opening up. It's about doing more. It's about challenging new frontiers. And that's why I counter all the traditional thought that downsizing is about freedom. It's about letting go of the stuff that has held you back. It's about letting go of that money-sucking, blood-sucking thing called kids that have stopped you from doing all the exciting things that you've not been able to do. It's about the time suck called work that have stopped you exploring who you were before you had to do all that. It's about having to maintain less, dust less, clean less, take care of less by having less to look after. That's what downsizing is about. It's about making room for the life you now want to live. It's about freedom. And that's why downsizing is so important. Is it a challenge? Yes. Is it scary? Yes. Is it tough? Yes. but it opens up a whole new world for you that enables you to live 20, 30, or as Christy said, she's got 45 more years, which means she expects to live to be 70 by opening all this up. And that's why I'm such an advocate of downsizing. The stuff you have represents the life you had. So now only hold on to the stuff that represents the life you want, and let's step into that life.
Terrific. Margaret, what does downsizing and freedom mean to you?
Well, taking Peter's line of naming this time, I would call it the era of mischief.
Oh, yes.
And now I'm a very mischievous grandma, get into all sorts of strife. And my girlfriend's just taken a toy boy lover, which has shocked her children.
Love it.
And I'm a very outspoken advocate, because I say, listen, I'm 70, don't give me that bullshit, right? And on you go, because you've got nothing to prove, you've got nothing to lose, and you've got a bucket full of experience, and you can tell, the lightweights and the real people within a heartbeat. And I'm having great fun, and I'm having great mischief.
Good.
So,
Love it.
and I don't have time to be dusting and mowing the lawn, because I'm out there being mischievous.
Ah, I love it.
Yes.
I love it.
Absolutely.
Wonderful,
Absolutely.
wonderful. And the other thing, my husband and I, since we're into this new chapter, we say you have to fill space. You have to fill space, because sometimes as we get older, we're seen to not exist in a way, or people talk down to us, or people ignore us. So filling space with mischief, I think, is a good way to describe this part of our lives. Christy, what about you in terms of freedom and downsizing? I think you've told us a lot, but just at the end of
Helps you to get out of those gendered roles of, cleaning and mowing and those types of things. And you basically have a common space that you live in and maintain. So I'm quite liking that. Also, I just have that sort of sense that, we could even move again. There's nothing to say that in 5 years' time we didn't pick up and move up the North Coast, or 10 years' time when we don't have other commitments. So we've just bought a house that's sellable as well. So it's actually a good investment. So we're not thinking that this is necessarily where we would even stay. It could be, we could be here for 30 years and it would be very livable. But in terms of, still thinking we could move again, that's quite a possibility. So I don't think there's any rules around that. And I just don't feel like there's any musts anymore. Like everything's a possibility. It's very freeing not to have any must-dos. So everything's open for negotiation. And we could actually go and live in Italy for a year and lock this house up. I mean, when we, can lock this house up or rent it to someone and go and live overseas for a year, which we couldn't have done in our other house, for example. Or move down the coast and go to, away for a month at a time. So everything's open now and it's very liberating.
And another idea that I've had, a few friends and my partner and myself are doing it, we're doing house swaps. Because once you realise that a house is to do what you want to do with this particular time in your life, and we're lucky to have those choices, then experiencing other people's houses, because I love the way people set up places. And so we've done some fantastic house swaps.
Yeah.
People say, how could you do that? What about if they break things? Well, we've done about 10 of them and they don't. If you're going into house swapping, you respect other people's spaces, and it's a lovely way of seeing different parts, and it cuts the cost of travel in a sense.
Yeah.
You don't have to buy accommodation. So that's another idea. Well, look, I think it's been so fantastic. I just have really, really enjoyed the conversation today. And I thank all of you for joining us. But very importantly, I want to thank Margaret, Peter and Christy. I think it's been such wonderful, practical information that, as I said to all of you out there, I hope you've written lots of notes. There's been a lot of exchange on the Q&A in the chat, and lots of people have put up some other ideas which are interesting. The one idea was put stuff out on the street. You never know. It often goes to people passing by. They'll see a treasure in your junk or your trash. So, folks, that brings us to the end of today's webinar. We're out of time, and I'd like to finish on time. And again, thank our speakers. It was just wonderful. Often not enough time. We could keep talking about a whole lot of things that that keeps this conversation going. But I think importantly, with all our webinars and our conversations, keep the conversation going. If it's difficult for you, the more you talk about it, the more you work out a plan, the more you look at options, the better the result will be for you. I think we told you this in the promotion of this conversation, that we have a copy of Peter's best-selling book. He held it up before, so Peter, hold it up again. Let it go. I think let it go. And Peter's very much, we're very appreciative, Peter, that you've donated that, and we'll be able to randomly draw a name of the people who joined us today. And we're close to 200 people that have joined us throughout the morning. So be one lucky person amongst the 200 people that have been with us. I'd like to always, pardon me, thank the COTA staff, because these run pretty smoothly, and we've got good IT and we've got terrific staff that work in the background to make sure that you're all connected and that hopefully many of your questions get answered. As I said, keep the conversation going. The next webinar we'll be doing will be in April, and we'll be focusing on the federal budget and especially what it means to older people. A very important time in our democracies, folks, as we see the world go through difficult times. We think about all of the people in Ukraine and in Russia and the surrounds. It's a really, really, really difficult time. Our world has changed so much. So it's important, with elections coming up, that you make sure that you exercise your right to vote for whoever you think is important and will do work for older people, and ask questions about what their policies are on issues to do with older, especially issues with care and the end of life options. There's one program that I haven't talked about, which I'd like to give a little shout out to. We have a band of volunteer community speakers, and they're available to come and speak to your group on a range of topics. So the volunteers are trained about a variety of topics, and if you'd like them to come out and or via Zoom, they can come and chat to your group about everything to do with navigating the aged care system, to issues to do with energy saving, all the things that are important for us to have a quality of life as we all age. Well, thank you for joining us. I've just had a terrific morning. I finished my cup of tea, and then I'm going to go into the storeroom just behind me here, because there's a whole lot of photos. We didn't talk about photos, and I'm not sure what I'm going to do with them, but I will be tossing some, but I'll be taking pictures of others so that they remain in our family, and especially things that are important to me. So thank you, everyone. Thanks again to Margaret, Peter and Christy. Have good mornings, everyone. Wherever you are, please stay safe, healthy, stay connected, and think about decluttering. Bye.